music director of the Erie Philharmonic, and it is a great pleasure to be with you on another coffee chat. This time I'm here with the principal clarinet of the Erie Philharmonic, Amitai Vardi, and a member of our wonderful horn section, Emily Rapson. Emily, it's so great to have you here. Welcome. Actually, you're both coming from a relatively same part of the world, right? Aren't you both Clevelanders-ish?
Yes, I think we're even almost on the same side of Cleveland. I'm on the east side.
I'm as well.
There we go.
Yeah, when I went to school in Cincinnati, they talked about the sauerkraut belt, which is this imaginary line that bisected the city in half, and West Siders never came to visit East Siders, and vice versa. It was very strange. There is a little bit of that still exists in Cleveland, right? I mean, do you guys ever venture into the West Side?
I have to say, not nearly as much as I should, which is funny because I think the best food and beer and drinks are over on that side, and I'm totally into that. And there's something about crossing that bridge that's really hard.
Yeah, there's almost a rivalry between the two sides, and East Siders are kind of proud of their side, and West Siders are the same. But I try to go out there, and the past few years there have been a lot of development on the west side and in downtown Cleveland. So there's definitely a lot more to explore than when I was at school at CIM early 2000s.
I actually grew up outside of Cleveland, so I have memories of a kid driving downtown and remembering how dirty and gritty and stinky it was near all the steel mills, and just wasn't a place that people wanted to hang out. And now it's completely transformed. It's clean, and both the East and West Sides have their own. Of course, they've always had their personalities related to the people that emigrated there and started the neighborhoods there. But I really love the fact that the city is very much inhabitable now, and everybody's kind of excited to move back into Cleveland.
Cleveland's becoming a hot city. I think it kind of started maybe with a little bit of LeBron James and the Cavs doing really well a couple of years ago. But, and I've even heard recently that the Cuyahoga River went from like the dirtiest river being on fire to now one of the cleanest rivers. So we turned it around.
Sometimes it takes a little fire to get things.
There we go. Fire starts everything in there.
It really does.
It's crazy that it's 50 years and it's still something that's kind of stuck around in terms of people's memories for half a century.
One of the breweries named a beer after they called it the Burning River.
Yeah, I think that might be Great Lakes even. Yeah, it's stuck with us definitely for better or worse.
Well, good now it's just now it's just a distant memory, which is a very good thing. Tell me a little bit about your starts, because you're such valuable members of the Philharmonic now. We really love making music with you, but obviously everybody has a start. Emily, do you remember when you first started studying an instrument? I mean, did you start on horn, or did you start on piano, or how does somebody migrate to the French horn?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting story. Way back in the days of Canada, when I lived there, I started on piano when I was about 5 or 6, and I have 2 older sisters, and they were both playing piano, and I was that kid that I was like, just get me started on an instrument. Like, I don't care what it is, like, I want to be in music. And I think a lot of that started from watching like Bugs Bunny and Looney Tunes. So, when we did those concerts, I was like in memory heaven and just like all the glory of my childhood. So I started on piano, and then as soon as I went to grade 6, I remember our band teacher had us try out all the different mouthpieces of different instruments, and I was already I was put into band. There was no chance of me playing a string instrument anyways, so tried the clarinet mouthpiece, the oboe, the trumpet, and the horn mouthpiece. Just right away, that buzz was just instant. So that was what I got put on, and I really hated it for about 6 months. It was not an easy instrument to start on, but
why did you hate it? Did it just not sound good, or just wasn't a good sensation, or?
I think I was just so impatient. I had all these dreams of being this fabulous musician. I was always listening to music. And I was way ahead of like where my skill level was. But luckily I'm quite stubborn. So I stuck with it. I just always envisioned myself being a musician. So I remember our band teacher gave us a little practice log, and he was like, do 15 minutes every couple days. And I was that kid. I was like, well, I'm going to do 16 minutes every day. So I definitely got an A+ in that class, but that's really how I got started on the horn. And, being stubborn really paid off with that instrument, I have to say. So
I think there's probably some element of frustration too built into the fact that when you press a piano key, if it's in tune, it sounds good right away. Even if you press a little bit too hard or a little bit too soft, you're still getting a decent sound. You don't have to worry about intonation. There's a gratification with taking up the piano. And then I remember when I first started playing violin, I thought, oh my gosh, I can't handle the sound. Because it's just so hard to play in tune. It's just so hard to make a very beautiful tone from the get-go. And I can imagine that was probably something you were facing too, having a piano background and being around that all the time.
Yeah, sure.
Great that you stuck with it. Ami, do you have a similar story with the clarinet?
Mine is actually quite similar. I started piano when I was 5. I grew up in a musical household. My father is a professional cellist, and my mother used to play flute. And so music was always around. I can remember or imagine a time when it wasn't really a part of everything, even if I didn't even hear it consciously. It was just always there. And so I played piano for a few years, but I wasn't completely into it. And I remember going to a concert of a friend of my father's, and it was the Mozart Clarinet Quintet. And from the moment that I heard that piece, it was love at first sight. And so I had to play the clarinet, and it was, it took me, at this point, I grew up in Israel. And so at this point, this is in Israel, and I started out and played there for a couple of years. And then when I was 12 and we moved to the States, I stuck with it, even though it was 1 year that I wanted to quit. And my mom told me that I just need to put in 1 more year and then I can do whatever I want. But I stuck with it, and I'm definitely happy for that.
Your dad didn't try to push the cello on you? I'm surprised they didn't try to keep it in the family lineage there.
Well, my mom was a flute player, so I guess she won with the woodwinds.
It's a coin toss at birth.
Right.
Oh, I'm sure those conversations were had between the no doubt about it. Now, obviously, there's a strong clarinet tradition in klezmer music. Does that play at all into your love of the clarinet or your interest, or were you purely coming at it from a classical tradition and then kind of migrated?
I guess klezmer music, especially growing up in Israel, was definitely, I guess, in the background. It was never a part of what my parents did or what I was exposed to on a regular basis. But I love klezmer music, and we were actually going to play the Klezmer's Wedding by Cyril Glick in Allegheny College a couple of months ago, which unfortunately didn't happen. But yeah, I think klezmer, it's a different tradition, obviously, than our classical. It uses much more folk-like sounds, and I would call it maybe a little bit less refined compared to our classical, but maybe has a little bit more fun in some ways than our classical traditions, where you can bend notes and you can do some improvisation and things like that. But yeah, my background is definitely, I would say 90+% in the classical world, but I enjoy kind of venturing towards klezmer at times.
So Emily, in terms of what was going on in your household, you had sisters that were playing the piano. Was classical music an important part of what was on the radio or what was on the record player or the stereo at the time? Or were your parents listening to, I mean, when I grew up, my dad was listening to the Byrds and Motown records and things like that. And of course, my mom was a music teacher, so I got that angle from there. But I mean, pop music was as much a part of my upbringing as being exposed to classical. Was that the same in your household? Or?
Yeah, I would say that like more pop than anything else. Neither of my parents are musical in any way. It's for sure skipped a couple generations. There are some family members of mine that live in like Nova Scotia and up in Ottawa, and they're actually professional musicians, one being a clarinet player. So I think it must have just come down that way. But no, my parents were like nerdy, listening to like Phil Collins and some other like soft pop of like the 90s. But it's funny, I remember going through my dad's record player at one point, and he had like the Dennis Brain horn concertos. And I was like, this is oddly random since you are not musical in any way. And he had it like from way back when. But no, it's a miracle that I turned out to be a musician, honestly.
Well, let's fast forward a couple of years and talk about your steps towards becoming professional musicians. When it comes to high school, do you know at that point, oh yeah, I'm really in this, I'm actually enjoy practicing, I'm spending more time doing it, I'm enjoying making music with other people? Did you guys get involved in youth orchestras? I mean, what was that? I mean, it's one thing to excel and play an instrument when you're young, but then to make that decision, I guess, and I'm not sure when it happened in either of your lives, but when did you, and do you remember that time when you thought, I actually probably would like to make this my life?
I think for me, it was sort of just gradual. You know, I was always the band nerd. It was just something that I just loved doing, and I surrounded myself with similar people. So those were always my group of friends. So in the summer, like I was at band camp. And then when I wasn't at band camp, I was teaching at band camp. There would be absolutely fantastic youth band in our neighborhood. And it was just like the cool thing to do. So I was always in the youth band. And then there's a great arts high school on the east end of Toronto called the Etobicoke School of the Arts. So I auditioned there and I got in, and you know, it was one of those natural paths where it was just normal. This is what you're doing. This is what you're pursuing. So it really wasn't a question of what am I pursuing, but how and where. And then, of course, I didn't go very far for my bachelor's degree. I ended up at the University of Toronto. So I lived with my parents and saved money. And then I knew I wanted to come to the States. There was just a little bit more happening, maybe a little bit more opportunity. So it was recommended that I moved to Cleveland, and I did. And then that was some 10 years ago.
Yeah.
Which is crazy to think that I've been here for an entire decade now.
Well, I think Cleveland's the more richer for people like you who go to study at CIM and then just realize, hey, I can actually forge a career by living here.
Right.
I think that is like, I think about Pittsburgh and think about all the students that come from all over the world to study at Carnegie Mellon. And now Uber and Google and all these incredible tech companies have second and third and fourth and fifth campuses here because they want to capitalize on that incredible richness and wealth of students that have migrated that way. And I'm sure it happens in virtually every city that has a really fine music school. How about you, Ami? Do you remember the moment when you thought, I can't think of doing anything else? Or do you think of doing anything else?
I'm starting to think about it. No, I'm just kidding. For me, it was gradual as well, but I feel like clarinet was a definite love, but I didn't put all of the time into practicing really that a lot of professionals put early on. So I feel like things came, I don't want to say easily, but maybe naturally for me. And I was in the youth orchestra and I was in the bands, and it was fun. But I'm not sure that in high school I really knew that was it. And it's interesting because my dad, being a professional cellist, always tried to push me away from being a professional musician, and that might have been a part of it, just because our field is so difficult. And it's interesting, maybe this was my way to rebel, to actually go for music. But I think somewhere, I started at the University of Wisconsin, actually, in Madison, where my father teaches and where we moved to when I was 12. And then after the first year, I went to Bowdoin Music Festival in Maine, and I studied with Yehuda Gilad, who teaches at Colburn and at USC, and is considered one of the clarinet gods of our time. And once I saw the level there, and once I had that experience, that's kind of when things clicked. And so my after completing 2 years at the University of Wisconsin is when I transferred to Indiana University, and kind of continued it was clear to me at that point for sure that was going to be the path. And then went to CIM, and then actually went out to Los Angeles for a couple of years to study with Yehuda Gilad after finishing my master's at CIM. So it was clear. It was always, I always knew it might or could happen, but it was really in college that I actually kind of hunkered down and said, this is it.
Now, a lot of our musicians also have day jobs, and I think a lot of our audience doesn't understand that our musicians essentially, while they're professionals, they also supplement their income with the Erie Philharmonic by playing in other orchestras or having other positions. Of our masters at universities, or business people, or essentially just have, another job or two or three or four in terms of playing in ensembles. Also, the Erie Philharmonic's not necessarily the only orchestra in which our musicians play. Can you give us a little bit of how your life is spread out, and how you have different opportunities to make music or to work in the administrative realm of music? Emily, how about you? I know you have a position in Cleveland related to music, but not specifically playing with that particular institution.
I do, yeah. I feel especially fortunate during this time to have a full-time job in a music nonprofit, but it's not related to playing. I'm the education and outreach coordinator at Piano Cleveland, which was formerly the Cleveland International Piano Competition. We just rebranded in the last 6 months. And I've been there for almost 3 years, but it's not unheard of for us to have just really a varied of income. And I think it's becoming especially evident now that all the playing has come to a halt for the moment, that something like that is going to become the new norm, and maybe it's necessary. But I definitely started on the admin path about 7 years ago, and this is just where it's led me. But I love it, because it's, as much as I love to play, I also love to create playing opportunities for others. That's really rewarding for me, is just having work for my friends and, instilling the love of music to future generations. I was never a piano all-star, but we like to say it is the most, it's an instrument that is so available to everybody in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways it's really not available because of its size. But everyone can play piano, which is the beauty of it, right? You just play it. So it's the most accessible and least accessible instrument. So does
that have something to do with the mission of Piano Cleveland? I mean, is the idea now to kind of expand beyond just the International Piano Competition, which of course is an amazing thing in and of itself, to know that Cleveland has one, and one that's so respected and has produced so many important winners over the past years. How has that morphed over the past? Is that part of the reasoning for the rebranding?
Yeah, so a lot of people don't realize how much program we actually provide throughout a year. as opposed to the competition that happened every 3 or 4 years, depending when it was. We have a concert series that happens on the year. We have a fairly robust education and outreach program where we're sending artists to play in senior living facilities about 10 to 15 times a month. We're bringing music into schools several times a year. We started a piano preparatory camp last summer, which was a huge undertaking and really fun. And we also have a youth competition. So there's just a lot happening. And we've got some really exciting new educational projects that are going on. I think everyone has had to kind of rethink how they're approaching music education during this whole time. So we've got some exciting virtual programming that's launching in just a couple weeks ahead of this new virtual competition that we launched, since the CIPC is postponed until next summer. Now we have this, what we're calling Virtuoso, and it's a global competition, and it's supporting pianists directly. So everyone, they're playing from 5 different locations around the world. We've got Cleveland, New York, Hamburg, Beijing, and London. And everyone who's participating gets money, and people have the opportunity to support the individual contestants throughout the competition as much as they can or would like. So, we really want to make sure that the artists that mean so much to us for what we do are being supported in a time of need. That was very, very important to us. It's important to our mission to make sure that, we're giving back as much as we can, and that we're sort of, promoting music from the littlest ages all the way up to, our grandparents.
Well, I love that the umbrellas or the tent is so big, because you've got artists who are at the top of their game and are playing at a level that puts them on the stages of all the major cities of the world. But then they're also being connected with people that are just discovering piano or just thinking that they want to take piano, and everything in between. So I think that's a pretty incredible.
Yeah, we're really trying to have a holistic view of an approach to music.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Ami, tell us what's going on in your world. I know you, among other academics, are essentially just trying to figure out how to make a go of this going forward. What's the latest news?
Well, I'm the clarinet professor at Kent State University, and it's been definitely tough. So the end of the semester, teaching all virtually, everybody basically just scrambled all of a sudden to change classroom setting or studio setting into online setting, with all of its problems of connections. Different students have different wireless situations and things freezing up, and all of the aspects of that we know by now that can hamper this structure. The other difficulty, specifically I think for musicians that we different in a math course or a business course, is the sound quality. So the sound quality can never ever be the real thing, nor can it be exactly in time. So obviously can't play with the student if you were going to do that in a studio situation. And so we've just been adjusting, and basically what we're looking at for the fall, and this will probably change a few times, is possibly a hybrid type of situation where, for example, larger classes will be completely online, smaller classes will be in larger rooms and maybe partially be in person, partially online. Private lessons, depending on what we find out in terms of droplets in the air and wind instruments, for example. We will have to figure out if a larger room would be sufficient, or if we'll have to go back online, or possibly do some things outdoors when the weather permits. So there's just a lot of what ifs and different kind of contingency plans that we have to think about and figure out. And lots of different committees within the entire university, and then the School of Music, and so on and so forth, are just trying to figure out, based on our current knowledge, what we'll do. As a whole, the university is looking to have classes in the fall and have students there in the fall, as a lot of other universities are looking into. And I'm hoping that as the summer continues, we'll have more and more information so that we can try and figure out what's the best and safest way to do all of that.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing because I was just watching television today, and one of the doctors said, we're relying on information from the 40s regarding aerosols and the spread of tiny droplets that go through the air. And of course, as a wind player or brass player, Emily, that's an issue. It's an issue for yourselves and for your colleagues and for everybody else in the room. And I know people are nervous, and singing is even under more scrutiny in terms of how this virus might be transmitted. So, I mean, believe me, we're looking at every way possible to try to reconstitute orchestras and try to go forward with as much of a normal way of instructing and a normal way of performing as we can. But we just don't know enough. And I think you hit on an important point, which is now we're all scrambling to try to figure this out. And it's hard to do under these circumstances, but we definitely want to.
I think some things are hopeful, seeing that Europe is opening up to some degree, and there's some orchestras that were able to already have some concerts. I think New Zealand is the only place that had a full audience, but I think they've had 3 cases in the past month. So it's a very different situation.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it'll be a learning curve, absolutely. But I think, we're all dedicated to bringing music back and, keeping it alive. So one way or another, it's gonna continue. Music is our livelihood and it's our passion, and I don't think there's anything that's gonna really stop us for long. So.
And I think that there has to be some silver lining here, and if we realize how important music is to society, and it has been throughout history, any society that you look at, there's a fundamental aspect in the arts that has guided civilizations through, really, in many ways. And so even if we have to adjust in some major ways, I think that the thirst of all of us, and then the thirst of the audience for arts and for collaboration and for feeling inclusive in some way in the concert hall, when we're all able to, and maybe not in the way of the past, but in some way, then it will be that much more meaningful, and it will be an incredible experience because we've been missing it for so long now. This is incredible for all of us to in the summer be in one place without basically going from one festival to the next or playing in this orchestra or that. And it's really it's a void for me in many ways, because I just have to, in a sense, just stop everything and figure out, well, what is the meaning of all of this? Because as musicians, we never really stop and smell the roses. We just go so much of our lives that, but I also see silver lining in that. So it's tough for sure, but I think we'll be better on the other side of it.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think, there's a silver lining to all of this, and, just appreciating the music that we've had is just become so obvious. And I was gonna say the other silver lining that I've really noticed is saving the miles on my car. My car has never felt better. And part of my bank account, that line item on my bank account. It's the gas money.
It's amazing. I think I've only filled up my car once since the beginning of the pandemic. I mean, that's little.
It is bizarre.
Ventured out. Yeah. Well, speaking of smelling roses, any television shows or movies, or have you been binge watching anything, or taking up any new hobbies to kind of fill up some of that gap that we've been experiencing as musicians that don't have to race from one thing to the next?
One thing that I noticed right from the get-go, and I think this might have been specifically the time of year this all happened with, but I and my husband are what we like to call bird nerds. You can even see some bird art on my wall here. But we are avid birders, and when this was all happening, you know, I was really getting into the thick of spring migration, and I have never been able to be home during all of this, and we have like a fairly large yard. We've got a half acre with like a lot of trees, and it was just so nice, you know, working, but then going outside for, you know, a little walk, a little mid-morning birding, and just everything was just, it was here and it was available to us. So in a way, you know, this has led to a lot of time for personal hobbies like that. So really like got some great birding in this spring. I will for sure miss that, I think, when things get back to normal.
Well, they're going to miss you too, probably.
I did hear a report that birds were thriving with all the lack of human activity, but maybe people were just stopping and noticing more. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Likely. How about you, Ami?
Well, we have a 2-year-old, so we never really stopped running around. It's a totally different schedule for sure. But the amazing thing is that I get to see him grow up in a way that I really didn't and wouldn't during this period of time if it was a normal period of time. So that's been amazing, and spending more time with the whole family, with my wife. I've been running, which I used to do when I was at CIM, but haven't really kept up with it over the years. So I've been running 3.5 miles every other day. Yeah, doing some yard work, enjoying the sun. We spend way more time on our patio than I have before. So there are times where there are definite more times of stopping and smelling the roses.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Daniel? I mean, you have your son.
Same thing. It's exactly what Ami said. I would have never expected to have this much time or to have this kind of intimacy with my family over such a prolonged period that we've gotten kind of into a rhythm of just being around each other all the time. I thought I would go nuts, and sometimes it's like, yeah, I would like 20 minutes to myself, but the trade-off I think is pretty wonderful in that, I feel like this will be a bond that we're forging that will pay off later, and we're very grateful. There is one festival that I'm associated with that has not canceled. Knocking on every piece of wood. It's the Lakeside Chautauqua Festival, which happens on Marblehead Peninsula, and a lot of Clevelanders would probably know that part of the world because of Cedar Point. But we field a full professional orchestra every summer for 3 weeks. And while we can't put together a full professional orchestra this summer, we are forming a chamber orchestra. And rather than play in the big Hoover Auditorium, which is an indoor space, everything's going to be outside under a tent. So the first week will be strings only, and then the second week will be a chamber orchestra. But all is still according to plan. We reprogrammed the whole summer so that we could distance on stage and distance in the rehearsal hall. And I'm really excited about that because that's a wonderful respite for our family and a chance just to get a change of scenery and make music under different circumstances, as you both know about summer festivals. So I'm very excited that's still planning to happen, and we're still very much going forward with those plans. But then, of course, as you know, as the fall starts to creep closer, we'll be taking each each thing as it comes in terms of how to deal with these new challenges and how to get our orchestras back together. You'll be happy to know, and our audience will be happy to know, that we're really working hard and working very hard with the musicians to make sure that we salvage something for the 2021 season for the Erie Philharmonic, and not just salvage something, but actually put together something that's really exciting and creative, and hopefully industry leading. I hope a lot of our colleagues will say, hey, how did they do that? So fingers crossed on all those sorts of things, but I'm just so desperate to get back together with my colleagues, and I miss you so. I miss you both very, very much. I'm giving you a big virtual hug from here. I miss you both so much, and I miss making music with you. And I'm just totally grateful that you were willing to spend a little time with me today and just kind of talk about your lives and talk about music and please stay well and enjoy the rose smelling as much as you can this summer. And hopefully it's not too long before we see each other again in person.
That's
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
It's great to see both of you, and this was really fun. Thank you.
It was, likewise. Hopefully we do this again in person sooner than later.
Please. All right, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us, Daniel.